Welcome to Movie Recap, a channel dedicated to those addicted to movies. Our focus is to showcase the best recap of your favorite flick. Sit back, grab your popcorn, and get ready to be amazed by Jaws. A police chief, a marine scientist, and a fisherman spring into action after a white shark terrorizes the inhabitants of Amity, a quiet island. Spoilers ahead. A bunch of kids had a bonfire party late one night on one of Amity Island's numerous beaches, which is off the coast of New England. Tom Cassidy notices Chrissy Watkins, a stunning blonde, and she entices him away from the party to go ocean skinny dipping with her. Tom, who is very inebriated, passes out on the beach before he can even take off his clothes, but Chrissy is unfazed and leaps into the surf after undressing. Chrissy stops to tread water as she swims farther from the coast. An unseen thing notices Chrissy's paddling legs from beneath the water's surface and starts to approach her while ominous and terrifying music plays. The unknown thing strikes quickly, grabs hold of Chrissy's leg, and brutally jerks her about in the water. She is dragged away while holding onto a buoy. Unheard cries for aid are followed by an unsettling silence as she is submerged. The Amity neighborhood is getting ready for the approaching 4th of July weekend, which is their most lucrative time of the year. The local economy is heavily reliant on tourism, and residents anxiously anticipate the summer months when flocks of residents from the mainland visit Amity to enjoy its shores. The chief of police in Amity, Martin Brody, gets a call at home about Chrissy Watkins' disappearance. Tom Cassidy's report that she was last seen off the coast prompts Brody to visit the beach with his deputy Jeff Hendricks in order to look for leads. Hendricks soon comes across Chrissy's fragmented remains, which have washed up on the shore and are being devoured by crabs. When Chrissy Watkins was attacked by a shark, the coroner informed Brody, who is now back at the police station. Brody quickly gets ready to close the beaches until additional investigations can be performed out of concern for the safety of Amity's numerous swimmers. Aware of his intentions, Mayor Larry Vaughn pressures Brody and the coroner to change Chrissy's official cause of death from a shark attack to being cut up by a boat propeller out of concern for the potential revenue loss that would result from closing the beach at such a crucial time of the summer. Brody is still committed to ensuring the safety of Amity's residents and visitors, despite the potential financial cost to the community. He attempts to close the beaches, but Vaughn stops him. Ferry loads of tourists arrive on the shores of Amity throughout the following few days. Every day, there are many people on the beaches, and Brody is terrified that there may be another attack. Brody searches the shoreline carefully for any indication of trouble as he and his wife Ellen sit in the sand. Young Alexander, Alex Kintner, approaches his mother and requests permission to swim further down the beach. Mrs. Kintner gives her kid 10 more minutes in the water despite noticing that his fingers are beginning to prune from the time he has already spent in the water that day. One final ocean entry by Alex and his yellow raft occurs just before Alex is attacked by what is obviously a huge shark. The bloodied and torn pieces of Alex Kintner's raft wash ashore in the surf as the other swimmers panic and sprint out of the sea. When Mrs. Kintner cries out in vain for her son, she discovers a bloody rubber raft that belonged to him. Brody is finally given permission to close the beaches because there are numerous witnesses to Alex Kintner's horrifying and horrific murder, making the existence of a shark in the waters off Amity certain. A town meeting is scheduled to examine the recognized shark problem after the bereaved mother of Alex offers a $3,000 bounty to anyone who can find the shark that murdered her son. Most of the gathered town residents are simply upset that the beaches are being closed, despite Mayor Vaughn's assurances that it will only be for 24 hours, and Brody explains that the police department is increasing their efforts to keep the beaches safe and bringing in a shark expert from the Oceanographic Institute to assist them. Sam Quint, a strange and hardened local fisherman, quells the commotion by promising to catch and kill the offending shark for the sum of $10,000. Quint's offer is rejected at that time, but he still feels certain that he will eventually land the job. Numerous amateur shark hunters swarm Amity's ports after Mrs. Kintner's incentive was made public. Two local men make a poor attempt to entice the shark with a pork roast, almost becoming the third victim of the shark. Matt Hooper, the shark expert from the Oceanographic Institute hired by the Amity police, arrives at the same time as the throng of overconfident fishermen. After meeting with Brody, Hooper is given permission to see Chrissy Watkins' remains. After seeing the dismembered body parts, Hooper, who is obviously upset, convinces Brody in the Examiner that a shark, not a boat propeller, was in fact to blame. When the body of a gigantic tiger shark, which had been caught by some of the rival fishermen, is found hanging on the docks, the town exhales in relief. When Hooper looks at the beast's mouth and notes that its bite radius does not match the marks on Chrissy Watkins' bones, he concludes that the shark they were looking for was probably not the one. At first, Brody is relieved, thinking the nightmare was done. Hooper asks to cut into the shark to look for any recent remains it may have consumed given its sluggish digestion, claiming that this is the only way to be certain. Vaughn does not want to confirm it right now, especially given that Brody believes it's the only way to accomplish it. As Mrs. Kintner enters, dressed in all black and fighting back tears after likely attending her son's burial, the gathering becomes silent. She storms up to Brody and vehemently accuses him of maintaining the beaches while being aware that a man-eating shark was present. She expresses her conviction that Brody played a significant role in Alex's demise. Brody finds the interaction disheartening despite Vaughn's assurances to the contrary that her claims are untrue. Hooper stops by the house to talk about the shark incident as he and Ellen settle down to eat with Martin, interrupting Brody as he tries to unwind at home. When Ellen inquires about Hooper's past, Hooper replies that he has always been fascinated by sharks and still feels the same way about learning about them. He also informs Ellen that they still have a shark problem. Hooper knows it's not the shark, contrary to what Ellen believed after hearing on the news that the shark had been captured. Hooper speculates that Amity may be home to a rogue shark that will likely stay there until its food source is completely depleted. Brody and Hooper head to the docks after deciding to study the tiger shark's stomach contents. Hooper cuts up the shark and discovers only some partially consumed fish, a number of empty tin cans, and a Louisiana license plate that was recently used. The Louisiana license plate leads Hooper to hypothesize that the shark traveled from the Gulf of Mexico up the Atlantic coast. Hooper was correct in asserting that this shark was not the one responsible for the attacks and that another shark was still swimming about. No human remains were discovered within the shark. Brody is aware that he must once more close the beaches. That evening, Hooper and Brody continue their research by conducting some scouting on the lake in his boat. Due to his dread of the ocean, Brody faces an additional source of stress in the shark case and consumes a lot of alcohol before boarding the ship. Hooper finds a big object far from the shoreline using sonar equipment. It is the boat of a nearby fisherman named Ben Gardner, according to Brody. Despite Brody's objections, Hooper chooses to explore the partially submerged vessel and dons his dive gear before diving into the ocean. Hooper sees a sizable hole in the boat's hull and massive teeth stuck in the side. He recognizes the teeth as being from a great white while inspecting it. After doing more research, Hooper is horrified to discover Ben Gardner's corpse floating out of the hull with one of his eyes removed. Hooper runs to the surface after dropping the tooth and his flashlight. In the hopes that their findings from the previous evening may change Mayor Vaughn, Brody and Hooper make yet another attempt to reason with him. Vaughn, however, continues to obstinately disregard their advice and insists that there is no proof that a shark is to blame despite the evidence of Ben Gardner's wrecked boat. Hooper reveals to Vaughn that he removed a shark tooth, the size of a shot glass, from Gardner's boat's hull, but when Hooper is unable to show the tooth he lost in the sea, Vaughn again taunts and dismisses him. Hooper then loses patience and warns him that if he doesn't resolve his issue, the 4th of July weekend won't go as planned. Vaughn laughs at Brody's attempt to persuade him that they can schedule the tourists for August. He permits Brody and Hooper to take whatever steps are required to maintain the beach's safety, but he nevertheless commands them to keep them open. Finally, the 4th of July weekend arrives, bringing with it a large number of tourists, but beachgoers are anxious due to the numerous police boats scouring the sea for sharks. Vaughn urges his wife and grandchildren to join him in the water, along with a personal friend who is present, to allay everyone's fears that no one is swimming. Others start to unwind and follow suit as the man and his family unwillingly and nervously obey. While Ellen and their 2 young children remain on the beach, Brody is helping with shark patrol. In order to be safe, Brody asks his older son Michael to launch his boat into the nearby estuary when he wants to do so with a friend. Michael grudgingly concurs, lamenting that the pond is for old ladies. In the meantime, fear sets in as a dorsal fin is spotted among the swimmers in the main water. The throng rushes back onto the beach only to discover that the shark was actually 2 boys in snorkel gear and a cardboard fin playing a practical joke. A young woman standing above the water notices a massive shark make its way into the estuary where Michael and his pals are boating as the beachgoers start to unwind. When Ellen tells her husband that their son is in the pond, Brody goes to check what at first seems to be another prank. When both boats are unexpectedly swamped by the shark, Michael and his friend are being tutored in knotting procedures by a man in a rowboat who is probably the friend's father. Michael watches in paralyzing fear as the man is unable to get it to his rowboat before the shark bites and tears him apart as all three of the shocked sailors surface. Though Michael is transported to the hospital to be treated for shock, he and his friend are brought safely to land. Brody confronts Vaughn once more and demands that serious measures be taken to deal with the shark. The realization that his own children were also at the beach that day leaves Vaughn feeling exposed and scared for the first time. He finally gives up and grants Brody complete permission to take any action required to put an end to the shark. Quint is quickly hired by Brody to catch the shark for $10,000 when Quint seeks him out. Brody demands that he, Hooper, and Quint all go even though Quint wants to finish the task on his own. Quint and Hooper are at odds right away because Hooper is perceived by Quint as a reckless thrill-seeker and a naive college boy who has no prior shark hunting expertise. Although Hooper demonstrates that he is an excellent sailor, there is still tension when the three men set out on their journey in Quint's boat, the Orca. Once they were at sea, the men started to ladle chum off the stern of the boat in an effort to attract the shark. Quint fastens a line of piano wire to a robust rod that is leaning up against a deck chair made for fishing. After waiting for hours, Quint thinks the shark has finally materialized as the cable becomes taut. The shark swims underneath the boat until the piano wire breaks, demonstrating the formidable might of the opponent. Brody grumpily ladles more chum off the back of the boat as the journey continues and there is still no sight of the shark, while Quint continues to belittle Hooper. Unannounced, a great white shark's enormous head briefly pokes its head above the surface, giving us our first accurate impression of the enormity of the creature. Quint is informed after Brody is startled. Quint runs outside to have a look after Hooper and observes the shark starting to circle the boat. The shark, according to him, is 25 feet long and 3 tons in weight. Quint starts to fire harpoons attached to plastic barrels after giving Brody and Hooper a few commands. These harpoons are meant to slow the shark down and serve as visible tracking tools. Quint successfully harpoons the shark 3 times, but the barrels have little impact, and the shark simply drags them under the ocean. Hooper arrives just in time to fasten a sophisticated tracking device to the beast before it vanishes once more. The guys dine and socialize that evening below deck, where Hooper unexpectedly develops a bond with Quint as they discuss the scars they both bear from close encounters with marine life. Brody observes Quint no longer has a tattoo. As Quint confesses that the previous tattoo symbolizes the U.S. Navy cruiser, USS Indianapolis, a ship that Hooper is aware of, the atmosphere abruptly becomes gloomy. When the ship was sunk by torpedoes fired by a Japanese submarine in July 1945, Quint was on board and saw the deaths of almost 800 men over the course of 5 days, many of whom were eaten by sharks as they thrashed helplessly in the sea. Quint's haunting recounting of the incident indicates his remorse for being one of the cruiser's 316 survivors and confirms how his phobia of sharks developed. The three men sing a rowdy sea shanty to lighten the mood after Quint's somber tale, but the song is cut short when a returning shark forcefully knocks into their boat, causing it to start leaking. The shark escapes once more as Quint goes to the deck and fires at the 3 warning barrels. The crew makes a few unsuccessful attempts to fix the boat the following day. Diesel fuel has been tainted by seawater, and the engine damage is shown by the significant amounts of black smoke coming from the ship's exhaust pipe. When the shark comes back, Quint, who has been waiting and is prepared, gives Hooper the order to use a hook to grab the barrels and fasten them to the stern. Hooper is successful, and Quint tries to draw the shark by accelerating the boat to its maximum speed. However, the shark utilizes its powerful pulling ability to pull the boat in the opposite direction, nearly tossing it over and causing more structural damage before Quint rips the ropes holding the boat together. The shark escapes the barrels and dives under the water once more. Quint destroys the radio that Brody was attempting to use to contact for assistance. Quint ignores Hooper's objections that he is overtaxing the already damaged engine and drives back toward land at full speed as the shark starts pursuing the boat. The 3 men are stuck on a sinking boat with no means of propulsion and no radio when the engine inevitably fails. Quint provides the other men with life jacket, but he doesn't accept one for himself. Out of choices, Hooper decides to don his scuba gear and have Quint and Brody drop him into the ocean inside a shark cage with the intention of using a harpoon syringe to inject the shark with poison. The shark attacks Hooper with such violence that he drops the harpoon and is forced to hide in a coral while his cage is being destroyed, proving that the cage is no match for the predator. Hooper is missing from the shark cage that Brody and Quint haul up, so they presume he has passed away. The shark jumps from the sea like a breaching whale and lands most of its body on the sinking stern of the boat. As the boat flips over with the shark's gaping mouth at the bottom of the plummet, Quint and Brody cling desperately to the cabin. Despite Brody's efforts to save him, Quint ultimately loses control and slides into the shark's mouth where he is subsequently eaten. Quint's body is in the shark's mouth as it returns to the ocean. Brody enters the cabin of the fast-sinking boat and discovers one of Hooper's pressurized air tanks while feeling horrified and thinking he is the only survivor of this ostensibly disastrous mission. Within feet of Brody, the shark tears through the side of the boat. Brody tries to scare the shark away by beating it with the tank, but the tank becomes stuck in the shark's mouth, and the shark swims off once more. Now that only the boat's mast is visible above the sea, Brody scales the mast while holding a rifle. Brody starts to fire at the oncoming shark in an attempt to hit the air tank in its jaws now that he shares some of Quint's bravery and insanity. Brody finally makes his impact. The shark's head is destroyed in the tank explosion. Brody chuckles as blood and shark flesh splash into the water all around him. Hooper ultimately reappears a little while later, alive and well. After a feeble giggle to mark the conclusion of their journey, the two men put together a homemade raft and paddled back to Amity's coast. We really hope you enjoyed today's recap of Jaws. Please leave a comment below on what you loved about the movie and why. Be sure to like the video and please don't forget to support our channel by subscribing so you don't miss any amazing content. Until next time, lights, camera, action. We look forward to seeing you in our next video.